Hi, I'm Jeff from Verdant Dwellings. Now, yesterday Lauren and I asked some questions about peat moss and whether you guys had questions. And there was an overwhelming response saying you want to know more information about peat moss, how to work with it. So I'm going to talk you through a few little steps today and try and explain a bit more about peat moss. So in front of me here I have 5 samples of peat moss. They're all the same blend. They're at different stages of moisture. Now we've got dry through to sopping wet. Now I'm going to sort of talk to you about the characteristics of each one as we go through. Let's start with dry. Now if I tip this out in my hand, you can almost see it's like a bit of a dust. Now if I look at that, it's really loose and it's really dry. Now this is what you almost call would be hydrophobic, and this would almost repel water. So if you were to just water this, stick a hose on and water it, you would see a lot of it float up and it would potentially run past the edge of it down and not actually water your plants at all. If you ever see like this kind of like there's just nothing in it at all, it almost feels like it's drying to my hand. If you ever see a plant that's this dry, like this, sometimes you might even see it start to contract away from the edge of the pot. Now, that's going to need like 3 or 4 really good waters over a day to try and get back up to a good moisture level. Or you could just plonk that in your sink, in a bath, give it a water overhead, let it soak 10 to 20 minutes, no more, and that will replenish the moisture in that, and you're not going to lose any over the edge of the pot. Now the next sort of 3 are, I would say, almost ideal moisture levels. Working with this one. Now it feels almost dry to touch, but it's not dust. You can kind of see it's a little bit darker in colour. Now if I squeeze it really tight, I can feel just a tiny little bit of moisture in that. Now if your plant is in that, it's still going to be happy because it's still going to be just getting a bit of moisture out of it, depending on the plant obviously. So if it's a fern, you'd want to be definitely giving that a water. If it's a calathea or a devil's ivy, you could potentially leave that even for another day or 2 before giving that a really good water. This next mix here, a little bit damp to touch again. Now if I squeeze that, you can just hear a bit of moisture and you can see it. But when you touch that, it doesn't really feel wet, but there is a lot of moisture in that plant, and this is almost the perfect stage that the plant's getting plenty of moisture to the root systems as well as a lot of air so that the roots can breathe in and around it. This next one here is, I'd say this is for a standard plant. Don't sort of think, not sort of ferns, but like calatheas, devil's ivy, monsteras. This is about as heavy as you really want to water it. Now if I squeeze that, you can see I can get lots out of that in there. So this is about as heavy as you ever really want to water your plants. They're still getting a bit of air in and around the roots, but you're not choking it out. Now this last one, I see this a bit from people who haven't used it before or not sure, and they water and they water and they water. The plant starts looking a bit sad and they go, oh, doesn't need another drink, give another water. They pick it up and they go, oh, it feels okay. It feels probably about the same weight as a wet potting mix pot. Now these other ones, peat moss is a lot lighter in weight, and it just, so you've got to sort of allow for that. The weight is different with a potting mix because there's no sand, there's no pine bark in it. It is just peat moss. But if I pick this out, it is just a wet bog. It is like, it feels really wet in my hand. If your plants are like this at all, one thing you can do is pull the whole plant out with the roots and just give it a good squeeze and try and get some of the excess out of it. You can see, like I've given it So you can see how wet it is. So if you kind of wring that out, now you're kind of coming back up to almost like this standard. We're wringing it a bit more. Now kind of back into this level of moisture. So I hope that helps with a bit of moisture. I'll talk about it a bit more in the next video.